Good day, dear colleague. I'm Maksym Panchenko. I'm an analyst for Internews Ukraine. Thank you sincerely for finding the time and the opportunity to join us today. I'd like to thank the journalists, and I would like to thank our mayors who are there in the front line, who found the time to talk to us and to share the news directly from their cities. Our meeting today is organized by the Ministry for the Development of Territories and Communities. This meeting will be dedicated to the challenges facing the cities in the front line. We will hear about the Ukrainians, what media are participating in this discussion. Let me tell you a few words about our agenda. Set for today, we'll give the introductory address to Oleksiy Chernyshov, the Minister for Communities and Territories. Then we'll watch two short videos, a digest of what's happening in the hotspots in the front in Chernihiv and Trostianets, and afterwards we'll give the floor to the mayors of the towns who've joined us today. The mayor of Mariupol, Kherson, Chernivtsi, Zhytomyr, Kharkiv, Vasilkiv, Trostianets, Merefa and Sumy. Once they've taken the floor, once they've briefed us on the situation in their region, we will proceed to the question and answer session. Please note that since there are many journalists in here, we are planning to give the floor to 5 or 6 journalists to pose their question, and it will help translate your questions into Ukrainian language, and then I will ask the others to put their questions in chat. And when you write your chat, please state this city whose mayor you're addressing, and then follow up with the question. So the process is as streamlined as it can be. And since there are many recipients of the questions, let's take one question at a time. Let's pose all the questions to one speaker and then proceed to the other. I think these are all the technical announcements that I had to make. We can start the plenary, and I'm giving the floor to Oleksiy Chernyshov, the Minister for Communities and Territories. So let me start by thanking the mayors of the cities who made it possible to connect to us in these most pressing times and share the truth with the world, the truth about what is going on in the Ukrainian cities. On the 24th of February 2022, Russian war of aggression was launched. The first blow was taken by the Ukrainian cities. From the first day, the country has sustained tragic consequences, including the infrastructure of the municipal infrastructure, residential buildings, incredible humanitarian difficulties, the difficulties with the operation of the critical infrastructure, and most importantly, the casualties among the civilians, including adults and children as victims. Today, we have assembled this conference in order to share with the media of the world the truth about what is going on the ground in the Ukrainian cities. For my part, I would like to thank the mayors of the Ukrainian cities, and I have to say that we owe it to them, since no mayor has fled, no mayor has abandoned his city, and from day one has been working to ensure their cities can operate as much as they can, and the challenges are addressed with the primary objective of protecting the people. We will never, ever surrender or do anything remotely similar. Now, in the 14th day of war, in 2 weeks, the Ukrainian cities have demonstrated as much. This has come at the titanic effort of the mayors, their team, of the entire cities and city residents. I am certain the mayors will share the experiences firsthand. And from the viewpoint of the government of Ukraine that I'm representing today, the government of Ukraine is fully operational. We set up a humanitarian headquarters which addresses the humanitarian issues. We are working to combat a food crisis. We are planning to issue resolution in support of the Ukrainian communities to give them financial relief to address the utility gaps that have arisen, and other support packages will also be provided by the government. In any eventuality, we will need to rebuild our cities. We will need to rebuild the infrastructure, and I'm certain we shall do it very soon. But for that to happen, we need to overcome the challenge still looming over us. I am very happy that at this conference today, we have the cities that have shown themselves to be the true hero city. This title was awarded to the city of Kharkiv, Chernyshov, Mariupol, Kherson, Hostomel, and Volnovakha. We are proud of these cities. We are proud of their mayors, of their communities, and of all the city residents. I know that today is the time when the mayors have to take the floor and share their situation on the ground in their cities. Thank you. Thank you, Minister Chernyshov. Before we proceed and talk to the mayors, I have 2 videos to show you, to give you some footage of what the Russian Federation inflicted on the Ukrainian cities. What is happening in the field? I'm asking the technical team to upload the videos.
Вокзал. Город Trostianets.
The railway station in
Это,
Trostianets.
блядь, що тут робиться, блядь?
Thank you, colleagues. Now we transition to the conversation with our panelists. We'll start with Deputy Mayor of Mariupol, Serhiy Orlov. If you could please share with us about the situation in your city of Mariupol. What is the status with the evacuation? We already have received a question from The Guardian. So the floor is yours. Good day, dear colleagues. Greetings to everyone. It pains me to say that we have terrible, darkest of times. And let me tell you what's happening in Mariupol. We know that we are into the 14th of day of war in Mariupol, and recently Mariupol has been continuously shelled, and we are shelled from all types of weaponry owned by the Russian Federation, like the avia bombs, artillery, multiple missile launchers, and some other types of weaponry we have not heard of before. To start with, the war waged by Russia isn't simply treacherous, it's a war crime, the only aim of which is the genocide. And we have seen for ourselves in Mariupol that Putin aims to capture Mariupol despite any destruction, despite the human cost. The war started with us with a treacherous destruction of all the communications to the city. So the energy, water supply, the sewerage systems have been disconnected, have been destroyed, and this was done explicitly with the intent of the Russian army. Mariupol had 15 supply power lines, and all 15 power lines were bombed. And when our repair crews arrived to the site, they came under continuous shelling from Raz, and we were not able to restore any supply systems to the city. 2 days ago, the gas line was bombed. So for 8 days, the residents have not had any means of receiving gas or power. We had a humanitarian crisis, but now this is pure genocide. The city is encircled by the Russian forces. Our armed forces are defending the city, but all supplies are denied to the city. We know that the city and the residents have reached the medieval times, because the only way to cook food is an open fire. There are many cases when people have had to compete for some sticks to be able to cook food. I would have never thought this would happen, but people are very happy to have snow because they can collect snow, melt it, and have drinking water. So this is a daily living for our residents. The Ukrainian troops are bravely protecting the city, but we are fully aware that from a military standpoint, we can't defend ourselves on the ground, but in any case, we are defenseless from air. Mariupol is continuously bombed by aviation. This night, the Azov manufacturing facility, the biggest metal production site in Ukraine, has been bombed to pieces. And these are unguided bombs. It's a half-a-ton lump of metal dropping from the sky, destroying all indiscriminately. So a lot of districts have been devastated. We received the recent data from the police, and they've counted 1,200 casualties. And I apologize for saying it bluntly, 1,170 civilians killed on the street as a result of bombing or shelling. Today we made the first communal grave, and we buried 47 individuals in the city. We couldn't identify all of them. 3,000 babies are deprived of food. Their mothers have no breast milk, and there's no way to get baby formula. This is the day-to-day living of our residents. And we know that Putin's intent is to destroy as many Ukrainians as he can and have Ukraine without Ukrainians. So we are pleading with all the organizations. We are asking you to spread the war. This is not a war of Putin against the Ukrainian army. It's defending. It's a war against the civilian people. It's a genocide, and it has to be identified as a war crime, and it has to entail the right punishment. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Orlov. It hurt to listen to what you had to say, but this is the way things are in many Ukrainian cities. We have to persevere, and let's listen to the other mayors. We have the mayor of Chernihiv, Vladislav Atrushenko. Are you with us? What about the mayor of Kherson, Ihor Kolykhayev? Are you connected? We see the mayor of Kharkiv, Ihor Terekhov. So the floor is yours. Good day. Can you hear me? Good day. I'd like to start by saying that the city of Kharkiv is massively shelled by the Russian troops. You will know that Kharkiv has sustained heavy attacks inflicted on the residential quarters. The infrastructure is being destroyed as the fire is directed at the infrastructural objects. But this, I mean, the power stations, the heat stations, the pipelines, power lines. So the current situation is that over 400 homes, large multi-story buildings, have come under shelling. They are unfit for living. So we have evacuated the people to the schools, to the basements, because we are under continuous barrage. We are attacked by artillery weapons, and we are attacked from air. I convened the city council, and we supported the initiative of the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to protect the sky over Ukraine. This is critical for us because peaceful people die, and it's a matter of life and death. I'd like to thank our utility companies, as all the utility companies have found themselves to be in the front line. They're doing everything they can when the districts are shelled, but our communal staff are working hard to fix all the damage resulting from the shelling. We change the transformer power stations. We try to have them up and running. We fix the pipelines destroyed by missiles. We try to restore the thermal stations. We try to fix the water pipelines. There was a 1,200 volume water pipeline that was destroyed, but we've been able to localize the damage. So the utility companies are on the front line and doing what they can and even the impossible. I have to say that we are even removing the trash from the residential district, as it's important for us. We need to be doing it despite the shelling. Our communal companies are sparing no effort and removing the garbage. We are sanding the roads because we have snow these days, and we want to make sure that the residents see that the city is operating, living. Yes, we are hard pressed. Yes, we are under continuous barrage from the Russian troops, but still all the communal services are working as one. Thank you. Thank you. Mayor Terekhov. I'd like to give the floor to the next speaker. We have the mayor of Trostianets, Yuriy Bova. We've seen you among the participants. Good day. I'm going to say the following. Trostianets for 14 days in a row has been under occupation. Dozens or even hundreds convoys passed our city. These are the weaponry, the heavy arms encroaching on Ukraine from the Russian Federation. Trostianets is 40 kilometers or slightly less from the border, and we have received this armada, and we see what's happening. Firstly, the social infrastructure is being devastated as the military have taken up the administrative buildings, residential buildings, kicking out the streets, people onto the streets, taking up their apartments. They have looted all the shops. We provided the video where you can clearly see Russian million bursting into pharmacies, supermarkets, looting shops, offices, robbing people from their vehicles. All the buses have been taken from us. They've put the buses and tanks are hiding behind them, using buses as cover. These are people killing civilians. Many people were killed who did nothing to warrant it. They were simply walking down the street and they were simply shot, or some vehicles driving around the city were shot at. The burials are a difficulty. They're not allowing burials to happen at this cemetery. There's a Russian checkpoint at the cemetery. They're not allowing people to bury their dead. They've shot all the ritual vehicles, and we for 5 days have not been able to bury the dead. The city is under siege, so no food is brought into the city as all the roads are blocked by Russian checkpoints, and no humanitarian relief has been able to reach the city. And the same goes for the neighboring Akhtirka, which is close by to Trostianets. Their artillery, multiple launch systems, Grad, Stau, Buratino, and some others are installed right next to the residential buildings. People have been dragged out of apartments. They're using people as human shield and are hitting Akhtirka, Velika Pisarevka, and the other settlements from those multiple rocket launches by destroying these settlements to the ground. We are bombarded at night. In Akhtirka is reduced to rubble. And I support the position of the mayor of Kharkiv, pleading to the entire international community, please provide no-fly zone, please shelter our side, because thousands innocent people will die who are now in plight imposed by Putin in our country. And we need to help the territorial defense armed forces with everything we can, because we need to preserve our villages and towns from this Russian horde, from these invaders who are brutal. Thank you. Thank you sincerely. Dear journalists, please remember you can pose your questions in the chat and you can raise hand so that I knew that you had a question, and I would give you this opportunity during the Q&A session. At this, I'm giving the floor to Veniamin Sitov, who is the mayor of city Merefa. Good day, dear friends. I'm joining my colleague today with the plea to shelter our skies. In our territorial community, we experienced an air strike when the village was bombed. It's a Yakovlivka village. Kindergarten, a club, a school, a shop were destroyed. Many houses were reduced to rubble. 4 peaceful people were killed, very many wounded. This happened during night. When people were sleeping, and this is when the aerial attack was launched. There were 4 shots, 4 missiles, and 4 craters. These were the huge lumps of fragile metal. So these were the missiles launched from air. So 2 planes drove overhead, as heard by the witnesses. This was the site of total destruction, and the ambulances were on the ground, and we arrived and tried to help, doing all we could to rescue as many people as we could. It was a horrible experience. Many people have left as everybody is afraid of their life. They're afraid of more shelling to come. We weren't able to identify the reason for the attack. It's just a village. There are no military units or any military targets in the area. We've been able to restore the gas supply, the power supply. We have the water supply to the village today, and we are trying to bring this village back to life. We are trying to conserve the destroyed shops to prevent looting, and I'm joining the plea of my colleagues, and I hope the journalists can spread our plea. Thank you. We also planned several more mayors, several more speakers, but I'm not sure they were able to connect for obvious reasons because of the situation on the ground. I will see if they're with us. Do we have Serhiy, Sukhomlyn, the mayor of Zhytomyr? Vladislav Otroshenko, the mayor of Chernihiv? Ihor Kolykhayev, the mayor of Kherson? Oleksandr Lysenko, the mayor of Sumy? Natalia Volosinovich, the mayor of Sitov? So unfortunately, they haven't been able to connect because of active hostilities. So let's transition to the question and answer session. We already have one question in the chat from Alicia Alamios from El Confidencial. Would it be possible to know an update of the civilian evacuation on the corridors? So are these evacuation corridors operating? Have they been provided during the previous days? I suggest we start with Mayor Orlov, Deputy Mayor of Mariupol. Dear colleagues, as for the humanitarian corridors, you have to see that there are several requirements. The ceasefire, that's one prerequisite. Secondly, safe transportation corridor to enable evacuation. Mariupol for 5 days in a row has been trying to open a humanitarian corridor. What do we see? As for the territory of the city of Mariupol, we have made the calculation that half the residents are wanting to plead, that 200,000 people are desperate to leave, and we have only been able to evacuate 6,000 people a day. We used to have 150 buses. Now we have 21 buses at our disposal. All the others have been destroyed by Russian artillery and aviation. So our evacuation is just 2,000-3,000 people per 24 hours at the maximum. But we were saying that there will be 3 sites where we would convene the residents, and in 1 hour these sites were destroyed from heavy weaponry, even from the artillery. So people are very scared, and it's difficult to explain why they are shelled by the Russian army when they're trying to open a humanitarian evacuation corridor. And we have been denied humanitarian corridor every single time. Some difficulties arise every time, preventing passage to Zaporizhia. They would mine the road, they would put in a checkpoint, or they shell the road, so they deny us access. We are making a fifth attempt today. We're leaving from Zaporizhia, but we cannot reach Mariupol. So this is the status of humanitarian evacuation. As for private vehicles, in the last 2 days, we've been seeing a situation when any vehicle leaving Mariupol is allowed at the Ukrainian checkpoint, but when it approaches the Russian checkpoint, it is shot at. They're not shooting at the vehicle, but next to it from the granite launchers, from the lighthouse, forcing the vehicle to return to Mariupol. So no evacuation by private cars is possible. No humanitarian corridor is allowed by the Russian troops. They are shooting Mariupol, bombing, and they're bombing the corridor between Mariupol and Zaporizhia. So this is the situation. Mr. Bova, we know that yesterday attempts were made to create evacuation corridor from Sumy region. What's the status in your city? Have you been able to evacuate the people? And a green corridor has been agreed, and Sumy Oblast State Administration has been trying to make this corridor from Sumy to evacuate the people. Yesterday, we were able to evacuate 1,000 foreign national students, and we are making the second attempt now. As for Trostianets, no such agreements have been made. People cannot leave the city. All the roads are blocked. Inside the city, there are 200 different types of vehicles moving in convoys around the streets. It's very dangerous. Currently, a lot of convoys are assembling in Trostianets in order to regroup, redeploy, and it's dangerous to leave by car or by group of vehicles. It's a serious threat to life. We are thinking how we can bring in small batches of foodstuffs to the city. We've brought them to Poltava and some other closer settlements so that we would try to bring in some food relief to the city, given the least minimum chance. People have run out of food. We had some stocks in the schools, kindergartens, hospital, but we've given all of that away, and the situation with food is becoming dire day by day, but we will not do it unless we think it can be safe. And moreover, Russians have seized most of our troops. We are afraid to use it. Yesterday, they encouraged the people to get in the buses, but we didn't know where the buses went to, what happened to the people. So we urged the people not to get onto the Russian buses. Thank you. And if I can ask Mayor Terekhov to comment on the situation, as the world has seen these pictures from the Kharkiv railway station and crowds of people trying to flee Kharkiv. As for the evacuation of people from Kharkiv, there are two ways to leave Kharkiv today. One is the railway station, and you have seen the footage. I was there at the railway station. I have seen and I've talked to the people trying to leave Kharkiv, and it's a perfectly legitimate desire. Many of them have children and babies, and the trains are provided. Some additional trains have also been provided, so you can leave Kharkiv by rail. We can also leave for Dnipro and for Kiev by car. So those people who have their own private cars can take these evacuation routes. As for the green corridors, Kharkiv isn't listed in the green corridors list, but the Kharkiv region is. Now the corridor is to be organized from AZOV, which is brutally bombed and shelled towards Lozova. So we've sent the buses from the city in that direction, and that just happened a few hours ago. Thank you, Mayor Terekhov. We have a question from a journalist from Kosovo, Zhytomyr. It's a very relevant and important question. What are the needs of the people in your cities? You pleaded to shelter the skies, but this is a military strategy. But what about the humanitarian needs that the Western countries can help out with, and what information they can communicate to their societies? And let me say that no matter what we say about the needs of our residents, of our cities, but I'd like to say that the first primary necessity is protecting the sky, because people are killed from the sky. Planes bomb us from the sky. It's not just a question of doing or not doing it. Let me give you your example. When you see a Russian Su flying over your head and they fly low, and you don't know whether the bomb is going to hit you or the house next door. People who've been under such bombardments as shelling as I have experienced, I can tell you firsthand, you would rethink, and you would also be pleading to protect the skies. As for humanitarian relief, look, what the people need is foodstuffs. Secondly, it's medications for certain, different types of medications like insulin and others. Thirdly, warm clothes. The weather forecast is for frost below zero. Kharkiv has received a lot of support from the presidential office, from the cabinet of ministers. I made a request to my fellow mayors, and we are receiving humanitarian relief from everywhere. I reached out to our sister cities in other countries, and humanitarian relief is on the way to Kharkiv. I talked to the mayor of New York. We had a conversation. You will know that the mayor of New York is flying a Ukrainian flag, and that is very indicative, because there are 115,000 Ukrainians living in New York, as he told me, and we'll be organizing humanitarian and financial relief. The situation remains that we need diesel fuel and petrol, we need lubricants and fuel, as we need to be delivering the humanitarian aid. Indeed, all that is necessary for the residents, but before everything is the need to protect our skies. Thank you, Mayor Terekhov. We have a question from RTV Slovenia, addressed to the Mayor Lysenko and Mayor Bova. What is the humanitarian situation in suburbs of city of Sumy? Were you able to organize the urgency medical support for the victims outside of the city? Let me tell you that the hospital is operating around the clock, delivering all the medical assistance to those who've sustained fragmentation wounds, performing surgeries, but we are running out of medication. The stocks of medication have been depleted. We've given away everything needed, like the insulin-dependent people and other that are in greatest jeopardy now. We need to think how we can bring in medication and how we can bring in food. But now the city is encircled by the Russian occupants and all the roads are blocked. So no medication or food can be brought into the city. We need to use the Red Cross or some other international logo to demand access for humanitarian relief to the occupied cities. And I concur with my Kharkiv colleague that our international and local mayors are happy to assist in all the ways to be able to provide some basic living needs for the people in our cities, but medication are a priority. And let me add another thing. Because of the brutal shelling and combat, the gas supply networks have been destroyed. Some power supplies have been disrupted. Some villages have been deprived of power for days on end because the Russians have intentionally damaged the high voltage line and destroyed the distribution network. They deny access for the repair crews, and some villages have been without electricity for 9 days in a row. This situation is across the entire community. There are 38 villages and towns. The communal services, gas company, power company are doing whatever they can, but that all lasts until the next shelling. We have another question from. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I wanted to comment about a no-fly zone, about sheltering the sky. This is the most pressing need of our country today. And I'm certain that the world has to heed our plea. There's no other way to help restore peace in Ukraine. Sky has to be the starting point. I talked to the mayor of Zhytomyr just recently, and because of the air raid warning, he had to leave for the bomb shelter. He might join us later, and please connect him if he joins us, because his communication is limited. He's not here yet, but when he is connected, please put him through. We will. My colleagues will let me know and we'll put him through immediately. We have a question from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. It's a generic question for all the mayors. And I'm asking all the mayors and the Minister Chernyshov to take the question. The question is whether the communities have the ability to deliver public services. So we mentioned the communal services, but utility services, but are public services delivered? What the situation and how relevant it is these days? If I could start addressing this question with your permission, let me thank the mayors and the leaders of our communities who've managed to keep their cities up and running. They're delivering communal services, public services. We have the situation in 12 regions with active hostilities, and the situation is difficult. Some public services are limited, but owing to the tireless effort of the mayors of our cities, we have to say that everything is working as normal as it can. Naturally, during shelling or bombing, we cannot ensure the seamless operation of the administrative services. This is just not feasible. So, in my opinion, the question is redundant. Let us focus the effort on sheltering the sky. This is our main message to the world. We'd like to address the journalists who are participating in this conference. I can see Mr. Sukhomlyn, the mayor of Zhytomyr, who's been able to join us, so let's hear from him. Good day, everyone. Good day, dear colleagues. We still have the air raid warning, but we have it at least a dozen times a day and a dozen times a night. We know the missiles flying in, and we know the fighter and bomber planes flying overhead. Everything is running. We have the heat supply, we have water supply. We are not using the Belarusian sources, but we're using European sources and other sources. We have some reserves. The public transportation is up and running. And our school has been reduced to rubbish, 300 meters away from me, same as a dormitory, a kindergarten, a maternity ward from our hospitals, the oil base located nearby, and more objects have been destroyed. A similar picture in here as elsewhere. The city has been turned into a fortress. We've built several circles or lines of defense around the city, and inside the city is protected with train hedgehogs and mows and sandbags. We are receiving humanitarian relief. I'd like to address our colleagues from Lviv, Volyn. Sometimes some companies sending humanitarian relief to us don't get it across to us. I just talked to the administration in Volyn, and some cargoes spend a long time clearing customs, and when people have to spend 24 hours clearing customs, it is no cause for optimism. We are evacuating people from Makarov and Bucha. 5 busfuls have been evacuated. We have trains that are going to the western part of Ukraine, like Rivne. We are in good spirit. Everything's working, and I'd like to thank all the mayors for your wonderful job. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for working under such emergency situation. We have a question from Sitov wanted to take the floor. Let me add a couple of words about humanitarian relief. The Kharkiv district, the suburbs of Kharkiv came under heavy air raids. Yesterday, we had a visit from Rohansk community, and we shared with them all the essentials, as people have been deprived of everything. There's one important thing I'd like to underscore: the baby food, the diapers and medications for babies. That is something we need critically. And another critical need I live in Kharkiv and I can see firsthand in Kharkiv and in Merefa there are a lot of people queuing for the ATMs. The only working ATM is operated by a private bank and people are queuing for hours to get some cash because all the shops have converted to taking cash and are not taking cards, so people cannot buy food because they don't have cash at hand. And this is another important question that I'm asking the Minister Chernyshov to consider, and pensions too for the people. A lot of people of retired age who used to get their pensions through the Ukrainian Postal Service. We need to help them and make sure they can get their money. That is also a very important need. Please consider it. Thank you. Right now, I will get in touch with the Minister of Finance and the President of the National Bank to take care of the payments. The government has made the decision to give extra powers to the oblast governors. They're now called oblast military administrations, and they will get additional powers to control the prices on the essential goods and foodstuffs. These are some critical essential goods that people need most. We have it under control. I know there have been some times when some price hikes have been reported. We have to respond as quickly as we can. The cities that have a regular supply of foodstuffs should not experience any price hikes. The prices should be the same as they were as of 24th of February. If the cities are under siege, there's a technical problem, the ability of supply the foodstuffs and the essential goods there. We have discussed the corridors, but the corridors have not been effectively opened. I hope by the end of today, I'll be able to confirm at least 2 successful cases of having delivered cargoes there and people back. But what we've seen in the last few days was continuous disruption and disregard of any negotiations, continuous shelling, denying humanitarian access. That certainly affects the supply of foodstuffs to the occupied cities. Thank you. Thank you, Chernyshov. We have the mayor of Sumy, Oleksandr Lysenko, who has joined us. Do we have him with us? We can hear you. So, if you can tell us a few words about the humanitarian and military situation in Sumy. The situation is under control. The city is closed. I can't see you. That's it. We can't see you either. But at least we can hear you. So the situation is under control. The armed forces are doing what they have to do. We do what we have to do, helping them improve their positions, and we are holding out. A lot of metal around us, so the situation is under control. The approaches to the city are under control. They're pushing from all directions. Hundreds units of weaponry are approaching from the beginning of war. We've seen some tanks, but this week we had 4 air raids. We have casualties from the first air raid. We had another raid this night, and they hit the downtown, the residential area. Fortunately, we've been able to get people out of rubble alive. Some damages have been destroyed, but we've been able to find 6 people, and they were taken to hospital, and even a dog was rescued. Earlier, we had a question from the journalists who are following us about the humanitarian situation in Sumy and around Sumy, and can you also give us some insights about the medical assistance provided? Is the access to medical help available? The hospital is operating there, providing relief to the injured, to the sick, but there is a scarcity of insulin supplies, which used to be a regular supply, but now it's disrupted. We need insulin, we need antibiotics. As for the foodstuffs, the farms have shared their supplies, but we need to gradually put in the supply channels in place, because we've received no foodstuffs that would be brought into the city. We've sold out all the stock or given away all the stocks we had in our food shops. So we are now working to provide petrol and fuel, foodstuffs and medications for the city. As for the corridors, some people are trying to leave by their own cars using the available corridors, the green corridors. Yesterday, my friend sent a family from Sumy, and they ended up in the so-called green corridor. This is Romne Sumy, and there was a tank convoy going in the opposite direction, and they had to stop the civilian convoy. And I need to take this urgent call. I'm sorry. So the first evacuation column was able to pass, no problem, but the second was stopped by a tank convoy, and they used the civilian vehicles as a shield to bring in the Russian tanks. There have been times when tanks shot at civilian vehicles, and it's just a matter of luck. Some get through and some don't. Russians have no humanity. They destroy residential buildings, they use mortars, they attack from air, they use multiple rocket launchers, multiple missile launchers. They shoot regardless. They've killed civilians who were killed trying to flee. Thank you. Thank you, Alexander. We have another question from Charlotte and the Relander from ICE, and the question is about the civilian infrastructure. We've talked about the civil infrastructure, but her question pertains to the detention places and prisons, penitentiary institutions. So can you give us some overall picture? Perhaps we could ask the minister first and then ask the mayors to follow up. I'm ready to begin with this situation in the country. All industries of areas of life have to respond and are affected. As for the penitentiary institutions, surely it's under the aegis of the Ministry of Justice of Ukraine, and they coordinate the effort. But surely, when we talk about daily bombings and the kind of challenges that the mayors have raised, we cannot This cannot be done during the continuous shelling brutalities and atrocities happening in the country. And we have to open our eyes to this and stop playing the issue of democratic rights and freedoms in here, and open the eyes and see what's happening. See the destruction of the infrastructure, but much more so the destruction of simple civilians of the Ukrainian nation. This is something we need to raise and emphasize. And this information needs to be documented, and we need to show the entire world. All the areas of life have been affected. There is just one solution. We need to put a stop to the aggression, and the first stop to it is to have a no-fly zone over Ukraine. Otherwise, it's going to continue. The mayors have to be running between the city hall and the bomb shelter. The people die as we speak. This is unacceptable. So we need to pool our efforts and try to shield our skies. Thank you. Thank you, Minister Chernyshov. Would the mayors like to add? Then we have the next question from Zhytomyr from RTK, Television of Kosovo. We are ready to give you the floor, and I will translate your question consecutively.
Thank you very much. Hello from Pristina, Republic of Kosovo. Thanks for having me. This is Zhytomyr, a news editor from RTK. First of all, please let me express my condolences to all Ukrainians who lost their beloved during this war, which hopefully will end as soon as possible. I belong to a nation and a country which 20 years ago was under Serbian genocide. So therefore, Kosovo and the people of Kosovo stand by Ukraine because we share the same values for peace, freedom, and democracy. Thank you. So my question is, Ukraine in some part of it has mixed population. What are the Russian-Ukrainian reaction about this situation? I mean, are they joined to Russian military or to Ukrainian military, or they are refugees like the other Ukrainians? Thank you very much.
Дякую. Для колег, для яких потрібен короткий переклад, питання полягає у тому, що в певних регіонах України є населення як українці, україномовні, російськомовні, українці, росіяни, і питання полягає в тому, в тих умовах, що зараз склалися, чи вони доєднуються до української армії, чи вони доєднуються до російської армії, чи вони просто стають біженцями. Оскільки це більше політичне питання національного рівня, я думаю, знову ж таки, можливо, якщо це не проблема, питання колеги з міністерства розпочнуть. Ось, і можливо, знов таки, якщо мери мають якісь деталі по місцях, будемо раді включити вас.
I have to give you a clear and straightforward answer. All Ukrainians, regardless of the language they speak in their everyday communication, are part of the Ukrainian nation, and they are fighting and defending Ukraine in the armed forces of Ukraine, in the territorial defense forces, or all other possible ways. As our mayors who make sure that the cities are running, that the people are provided with the utilities. Your question is a confirmation of the narrative imposed by the society. Let me put it correctly, poses a potential threat. All Ukrainians, regardless of the language they choose to speak, they're Russian-speaking Ukrainians, Ukrainian-speaking Russians, are all standing for Ukraine, are fighting for its future. So let me underscore yet again that the very question posed is a confirmation of an imposed narrative. And I would like to say that regardless of the language of their choice, Ukrainian, Russian, or other language, it doesn't matter. Ukrainians now are defending their homeland. They're defending our country. We are on our land. We are at home, and it doesn't matter the language we speak. This is an imposed narrative. Let me say it again. Dear colleagues, if I may follow up from Mariupol, as I was saying, we have terrible statistics. Yesterday, as a result of the armed aggression of Russia, we lost 1,200 people. We are a multi-ethnic city. We have Ukrainian, Russian, ethnic Greeks, Armenians living in this city. Many have married, but they are all Ukrainians, regardless of the language they choose. I speak Russian, I speak Ukrainian, and I've never been told or denied any language. I've been never denied speaking Russian anywhere in Ukraine. When we talk about the terrible casualties Mariupol has sustained, we'll know that at least half of the casualties were ethnic Russians who've been killed. So the Russian world, as they call themselves, is killing Russian origin Ukrainian nationals. So this is the Russian peace. There is a settlement now with ethnic Greeks who've been slaughtered, and the Greek community is aware of the loss. So this Russian world is killing Ukrainians of all different ethnic origin. As the minister was saying, we have more casualties because of the bombings. Yesterday, the metallurgy manufacturing facility Azovstal was destroyed, employing 11,000 people. 30,000 people worked for this site, and it was annihilated through bombing. We are asking to help us protect from the air raids to prevent further casualties among the civilians. We have another question to you from Today ID from Alfonso Bianchi. The question is about propaganda. In the front line, defending the city, there is the Azov battalion, one of the main targets of the Russian operation, at least in Putin's propaganda, the messages they spread. Do you think this factor is contributing to make the situation worse for you? They are the target, the Azov battalion, and this is why the Russians are attacking the city. Colleagues, let me make it very clear. There is no military objective. There's no particular unit protecting Mariupol. We have total destruction of the city of Mariupol. They've destroyed a municipal hospital, number 9. It's been annihilated. It used to be a 600-bed hospital. The day before yesterday, the biggest center for administrative services was destroyed. It was visited by the Ukrainian president, inaugurated by the president. We held a number of forums at this multi-center. What does Azov have to do with it? If they are bombarding and shelling the civilian infrastructure, what does Azov battalion have to do with 1,200 civilians dead? I don't get the question. I know that some objective might be reinforced by some Russian narratives, but I know for certain that the only goal is to destroy the Ukrainian nation. And we know that the sick imagination of some Russians sees Ukraine of no Ukrainians, but we are not going to let it happen ever. Thank you. We have another question from Maria from Swiss Radio. It's a difficult question. What are you going to do if your cities do fall, if they are temporarily occupied by the Russian invaders? Do you have a plan? And can you speak of it? Mr. Orlov, will you begin? As Mariupol is in the gravest, perhaps, situation, you are a symbolic target. As a municipality, we have it clear. Mariupol only has the future in Ukraine. It's a flagship city of Ukraine. It's a restored Donbass. We built it as a free city, and the development has happened under the Ukrainian flag. So it's hard for me to comprehend what will happen to Mariupol under a different flag. For sure, it's going to be an atrocity, a ghost city that we've seen so many in the territories temporarily occupied by Russia. These are cities without life. And I know, and we will protect Mariupol, and Ukrainian Mariupol will flourish. There is no Russian Mariupol. It's going to be a desert. Thank you. Colleagues, we've run out of questions we had in the chat. We have about 15 minutes remaining, a bit less. So let's use this opportunity for any remaining questions. I'm asking the journalists to write them in the chat or to raise their hand and to announce their questions. Meanwhile, I'd like to give the mayors and the minister the final word to recap the discussion today and to formulate the key messages we'd like to leave you with after this discussion. So, Mr. Chernyshov, let's start at the ministerial level. I'll be very brief. Look, the current Russian aggression is unacceptable. The world has to consolidate to address the question of a no-fly zone, of shielding our sky, of securing our skies, as the Ukrainian cities on a daily basis are subjected to bombings from the planes or by missiles, including by cruise missiles, and therefore this is urgent. This is our key focus. This is something we need to stop as soon as we can. Secondly, I'd like to thank every mayor for their role, for not abandoning their post, for coalescing their community in these days of trial and making sure the cities can live and breathe. You can't even imagine how difficult it is to ensure the city is running under bombs, under food shortages, when people are not secure, when fires are breaking out, when there is damage and destruction, when infrastructure is disrupted. It's still very cold in Ukraine. It's still below zero and freezing. So the matter of supplying heat to the homes is vital. And the atrocities you've heard today from the Ukrainian mayors, unfortunately, is the reality we live in. It's a truth, it's a fact of life. You cannot allow a European country in the heart of Europe be ravaged by bombing. You cannot allow people to die. These are civilian people. These are children. Every day. This is unacceptable. We have to put a stop to it immediately. There's no other solution. We cannot stand by and watch. This is no show. This is no blockbuster. This is lives of real people. People who've been building a democratic country in Europe. And when we talk about a European family, we cannot do as we do. We have to close the sky and help Ukraine overcome this aggression. Once again, I'd like to thank the international journalists for their attention. And first and foremost, I would like to thank the mayors of the Ukrainian cities working day by day to ensure stability of the infrastructure in these very difficult times. It's unimaginable. Thank you. Thank you, Minister Chernyshov. And we have a few questions in the chat. One of them is addressed to Mr. Orlov, from a journalist from Italy. How long will Mariupol withstand the Russian army? Dear colleagues, we now live in a time of war, and it's a question for the armed forces. As we can see, we're seeing that the Russian forces cannot defend the Ukrainian army on land. They're putting up a fierce fight. Now Mariupol is attacked on all sides, but we get information from our defenders that they will fight till the very last piece of ammunition. They will fight as long as they have ammunition, and they have more spirit to protect the city than necessary. So the Russian army and Putin try to defeat the mighty army by waging genocide, and this is what pains me most. And lastly, I'd like to say that Mariupol and Ukraine and the world has divided into before and after. The war has been on for 40 days. And I would not have imagined this in my worst nightmare. Yesterday, a 6-year-old child died because of dehydration in 2022 in Europe, in a modern democratic country. A child can die of dehydration after shelling. How can it happen? And this is what we live in. So the peaceful, flourishing Ukrainian city of Mariupol was the pity of Russian, and was the envy of Russian, and they're doing everything to destroy it. Thank you for your support. Thank you for what you've done. We know, as the president was saying, as the Minister of Foreign Affairs has stated, that every sanction is a life of a Ukrainian national preserved. We need to strengthen this support. Most local casualties were inflicted by bombing, and we are helpless against the bombing. Please protect us. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have another question from Ellen Johannes from the United States of America, and she would like to ask about the rumors of sexual violence. Have there been reports of rape or sexual violence in your municipalities during the invasion of the invading forces? And how many incidents were there? Would the minister give us an overall update, or the mayors perhaps can give us some specific information? Let me answer this question. We are watching this matter very closely. We have received such signals. This has happened in Kyiv region. We are verifying them, and soon we will have reliable, verifiable information that we'll be able to present to you. But knowing that this is an open war of aggression with all its manifestations, including rape, including looting and other crimes. And we are certain that this will be evidenced very soon. Thank you, Minister Chernyshov. And the last question we have, and this can be our concluding question, it is a question on behalf of the Intercultural Cities Network, including 6 Ukrainian cities. And the question is, what can mayors of other members of the network, like the sister cities, other European and global cities, what can they do to recover and build in the short and in the long perspective? How can the cities help recover, rebuild communities to ease the suffering of the people? Thank you. They have to do just one thing: unite a demand that their governments protect the sky over us. That's number one. Secondly, put pressure on Russia and on the global community for more sanctions and other instruments. Without doubt, the cities are working through these sister cities to give support and humanitarian relief, and we and the cities are most grateful. But currently, if you consider this question strategically, we need a no-fly zone and termination of aggression and sanctions that would be directed at the Russian Federation. Thank you. Thank you sincerely for this discussion. Thank you for Q&A session. Greatest thanks to the mayors who have found it possible to connect to us and share their plight, the plight of their cities with the world through the journalists here. I'd like to thank the journalists for your interest. I'd like to thank you for sharing accurate information with your media and your audiences globally. I'd like to thank you for helping cover the situation about Ukraine and about the war crimes committed by Russia. Thank you for helping shape the opinion of your leaders and of your government. I will not keep our participants any longer. They need to go now. Every minute counts. Thank you for joining us. Yet again, I'd like to remind the journalists to stay in touch with us. We'll send you a press release or the video footage. You can use the footage and the press releases to draft your presentations and everything related to the subject of this conversation. Thank you. Stay well. Have a good day as much as you can. And Ukraine is going to prevail. Thank you.